2 programs this year. Thank you, Bart. No. So anyway, I got 2 programs, but I do have 5 sisters. So you get to hear from another one of my sisters today. Donna and my other sister went out to Montana and did a backpacking trip with horses. So I really don't know much about it because she never comes and talks to me about it. But I thought, well, I said she can come to Rotary and tell them about it, and then I can listen in. So this is Donna Wentz, my sister. She taught school, another school teacher, by the way. So anyway, Donna.
Right about there. Is this good? Okay, good. All right. Well, as Larry said, we went into the Bob Marshall by horseback and 2 mule trains. So it was a little easy backpacking that way. And you guys thought that you were going to sit in these chairs and relax, right? Well, I'm sorry. Your horses are saddled and we are ready to go. And we're going to do a 7-day adventure in 20 minutes, right, Larry? 20 minutes, I think. Oh, okay, by 1. 7-day adventure by 1. So the Bob is short for the Bob Marshall Wilderness. And it's a complex that includes 1.5 million protected wilderness acres. It has no paved roads that bisect the area, none at all, and the area is managed by the U.S. Forest Service. Might have a problem. There it is. So what is the Bob? I just told you that. I'm a little behind here. A little rusty. Give me a chance. There we go. This is the tallest peak in the Bob Marshall. It's called Rocky Mountain. And the complex is actually located just under Glacier National Park. So have you ever been to Glacier National Park? It is south. And you can see that's kind of small there, but there's the Montana map, and that little red spot is where the Bob Marshall Wilderness is at. It includes the Great Bear Wilderness, the Bob Marshall, and then the Scapegoat. And to enter the Bob, you must cross over mountain passes. There's no it's only foot traffic and stock animals. There's no vehicles, no bicycles, no 4-wheelers, nothing like that. No motorized vehicles at all. You cannot even take a chainsaw because it's pure wilderness. It is the 3rd largest wilderness area in the lower 48 states. Death Valley's first with 3 million acres, and the Frank Church River of No Return in Idaho has 2.3 million acres. I've never even heard of that until I did this little research about the Bob Marshall. Have you heard of that? No, me neither. So down through the middle of the Bob Marshall, you have the Continental Divide. And it has a 22-mile-long unbroken escarpment that they call the Chinese Wall. So it's a very beautiful wall. And when they kept saying Chinese Wall, I kept thinking, no, we're going to Montana, not to China. So I was a little confused at first. That Chinese Wall has heights of about 1,000 feet. The region is named after a forester called Robert Marshall, and he was born January 2nd, 1901, died in 1939. And his dream was to have an area of protected wilderness. So his dream came true in 1941 after his death, when the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture designated 950,000 acres. And then in 1964, the U.S. Congress gave it statutory protection. So the Bob Marshall Wilderness is one of the most completely preserved mountain ecosystems. It has rugged peaks, alpine lakes, cascading waterfalls, grassy meadows, shimmering streams, coniferous forests, and big river valleys. And by the way, that's in the lower 48. We're not talking about Alaska here. So where did we travel? Well, actually a very small portion of the North half. We flew into Great Falls, Montana, and from there they came and picked us up and took us to this little town, if you can see my mouse wiggling here, called Chateau. From Chateau we went to the Seven Lazy Pea, which is located right in the wilderness, and that was the Lewis and Clark wilderness area. And then that's where our adventure began. So it was a 7-day trip. We rode the first day over mountain passes, camped alongside of a creek. Second day we rested because our behinds needed a little rest, and so did the stock. And that was 14 miles for that ride. Then we rode from there over to the Chinese Wall and followed the Chinese Wall, which is this trail here, that's the Continental Divide, and laid over the third day. I'm sorry, that was the fourth day. And then we rode east back out. So just a very small portion. And we laid over again, of course, before we rode back out. So we did 61 miles in 7 days in complete wilderness, and not really much when you think about backpackers. So why did we travel? Well, this is Linda. She's Larry's youngest sister. She's his next program. She was the initiator of the trip, and my partner, of course. And she's a member of the Ohio Horsemen's Council in Defiance County. And each year they like to do a competition to see who can ride the most miles. Well, Linda takes that to heart, and she really works at riding a lot of miles. So this is me. I'm riding Poncho. And when she asked me to go into complete wilderness like this, it was kind of thrilling, and I just love to see nature, so I think that is more my incentive. Now you may think that a trip like this isn't really for you, but we actually had 2 ladies on our trip that were in their 70s, and then the outfitter told us that they had had a person in the past who was in his 90s that completed the ride. So I think that's pretty impressive. So how did we travel? Well, by horseback and mule trains, right? This is our group. When we were clean, we smelled good here. The outfitters are allowed 15 people, 10 guests, and then we had 5 crew members with us. That meant we had 35 stock animals, that's mules and horses. That is the maximum amount that they can take into this wilderness area, and you must apply for a permit before going in. Most of the mules were offspring from a draft horse, the Belgian, and of course crossed with a donkey, and they were very strong. And then we had a lightweight mule, and she carried our first aid kit. Our gear had to be packed in duffel bags, and it was not to weigh over 35 pounds. Now, think about it. We had to be in the Bob Marshall for 7 days. It was rough to think about what to pack and to keep that under 35 pounds. So that's why we got a little smelly by the end of the trip. The packing the gear was actually a 2-person job. And they always asked the guests to hold the mule train. So that's a guest in the front. And the mule packers always pushed on the pack to make sure that it would come back to the center position so it was balanced. And as you can see by this mule's ears being up, they didn't mind being packed, and they really kind of enjoyed the attention, I think. One mule train always traveled on ahead to set up the camp for us, and the other mule train traveled with us until lunch, and then they left us too. Usually we just had our pack mule with the first aid kit. Now there's some required skills. So let's check your saddle seat right now where you're sitting, because you have to be an interactive rider to help the horse and stay alert. I know people say the horse does all the work, but I like to say that the horse does most of the work. You cannot become a dead weight. No, no, no. You have to stay up on your stirrups. You need to lean forward if you're going up a hill. You got to lean back when you're going down the hill. You need to move with that horse, staying relaxed at the hips. And you have to watch for anything that might spook that horse. And if you're leaning right now a little bit to the left, be careful, because this was 7,000 feet off of the ground, and it was a long ways down if you're leaning to the left. So if you're afraid of heights a little bit, this may get to you. This was called Headquarters Pass, where we were crossing back over the mountain peaks to get out. And I'm taking that picture way down at the bottom because they sent the mule trains on ahead of us. And that was to give us confidence that yes, there is a passageway and we will be able to climb over that mountain. So they showed us by sending the mule trains first. Another required skill that you must have. You must tolerate primitive living and pack wisely. So they provided us with tents, but we had to put our tents up at each campsite. The crew members, they took care of the stock. That was their main job. We did buy mummy sleeping bags with a thermal rating of -20 degrees. Now keep in mind this was July, but even in July it got below freezing at nights. And we liked those -20 degree sleeping bags. We also had this self-inflating pad that we put underneath our sleeping bags that condensed down to a ball like this, but you blew that up and you had a nice little cushion that protected us from the rocks. Our primitive living meant using the green rocket. That's our outhouse. We depended on the crew to set that up correctly, and unfortunately it did fall over one morning on one lady, and she moved us all. It was not a good day for her. A third required skill. Be able to accept wildlife and human interaction. This is the yellow belly marmot. We had a yellow belly marmot that drug a dentist's seat pad. Larry calls me two cushions because I would always ask for a seat pad. Well, he had a thick seat pad on his saddle. It was like 1 inch with gel in it. And he was bragging about this seat pad because his fiance gave it to him, and boy, he didn't have a sore rear end because of that. But this yellow-bellied marmot drugged that seat pad to its den and did a really nice job chewing it up. So he learned about wildlife interaction pretty fast. Now we were advised to carry bear spray. Now this is not the actual bear, because the fisherman, one of our guests, who decided to go trout fishing, he had a bear come to the river that he was in and wanted a drink. But he froze and he didn't get his camera up to take a picture of the bear. I don't understand why. But he had his hand on his bear spray thinking, oh my gosh, how do I use it? How do I use it? But he didn't have to. The bear only wanted a drink. He was told he was lucky it wasn't a grizzly bear because they're a little more aggressive. But on the other hand, the bears in the Bob Marshall are not used to seeing people, and they're not fed. People don't, they're always very careful about picking up the food, and so they don't know that people have food, and so bears really leave the people alone. Number 4, you need to be willing to get very dirty. So, yes, this is us taking our bath in 40-degree water using bio-friendly soap. This was called Soft Lake. It was halfway up on that Chinese wall. We also took another bath. Don't be offended by this next picture. If I can get it up. There we go. In the Sun River. And that was also extremely cold, and that's where they went trout fishing. This is another picture of that Soft Lake. Up here is where that Continental Divide was at. That hikers hike from Canada all the way to New Mexico, full speed ahead. And actually they told us that that's who gets in trouble with the bears. These hikers that are trying to get all these miles in because they're watching the ground and their footing, and they're not watching for the wildlife or the bears that they might come across. But that is actually a 3,100-mile trek along the Continental Divide if you're interested in doing that as a backpacking trip. No? So that Sauk Lake that we were in is right about in here. And you had to hike up. This was our tent, and we had to hike up here. And then the Continental Divide is up there. So a fifth requirement. You need to live in the moment, relax, enjoy, and take it in. Like these mules and horses, they are relaxing the morning after, and lucky for them, we didn't take them back out that day. So they got a good set or a lot of relaxation. They actually turned their stock out to free range because they didn't have hay. But since the ranch is on the wilderness property, they have to be fed weed-free hay, which is a little bit more expensive. It was easy to relax and enjoy the blooming bear grass, the lupine, which is the purple flower, and the wild geranium. And keep in mind this was in July. Usually these are spring flowers, but that is spring up in the mountains. This was our last campsite along the Sun River, and these two guests are looking at this. That's really nice, very pretty. And that was our view from the tents, and we were so happy because we had riverfront property for a day and a half. It was really easy to relax and enjoy the quaking aspens as we rode through them. And this is one of my favorite flowers. It's called elephant head lousewort. Now let's see if you can see the elephant heads. Do you see the head? There's an ear and there's a trunk. Now our crew guide told us that if we saw that, we were smoking something. But I think it's pretty easy to see it actually. As we crossed over Headquarters Pass, the mountain goats were probably as entertained by us as we were by them. And then, of course, when we were up on that Chinese wall taking our hike, that was pretty easy to relax and enjoy. Coming down was another story, though. I didn't like going down. So what was impressive? Well, it was impressive that our first two campsites, we actually drank out of the streams. They would put, on this side here, pine boughs, stick this little piece of wood in there, and see that little waterfall coming over the wood? That's where we put our water bottles. Now, I always held my water bottle up to see if there was anything swimming around in it, but I know that's not what was going to make me sick. And luckily, the doctor on our trip said he had enough medicine for all of us if we did get sick. But nobody got sick. It was really close to a natural mountain spring. It was pretty cool to have the fresh trout straight out of the stream cooked for us that night. But it was mostly a catch and release fishing excursion, so therefore this is just hors d'oeuvres for us. I'm not sure if it was impressive or maybe depressing, but we rode through areas that burned from a 1988 called the Canyon Creek Fire, and they allowed it to simply burn out because it was the Bob Marshall and it's wilderness. So 165,000 acres burned. Now that was 30 years ago. And some of the areas, the trees were taller than our heads, but in other areas the regrowth was only a couple, 6 inches, maybe a foot, and that was it because it was such harsh growing conditions. And you can see by these trees it was actually somewhat dangerous if you had a wind because you could get poked by them falling over by those sharp branches. And keep in mind, if there was a tree down in the trail, they were not allowed to have chainsaws. So our crew would get out the handsaws to cut the wood so we could get through. And we just relaxed and laid around. That was pretty rough. This is the ranger station at Gates headquarters. And I thought it was impressive that the rangers, this was their job, they packed in and out just like everybody else. They had mules and put their gear on the mules to go in and do good in the wilderness. But when they were at the ranger station, look at what they had. They had some solar power and wind power, so I guess, that was added later on. It was impressive that we ate so very well. Our cook had just taken a class on using wild native plants, and she collected as we rode and added the herbs to our food. Nobody got sick, so we figured she passed, and that was pretty good, and the food did taste good. And of course, our campfires were impressive. So, I promised I would keep it under 20 minutes. I'm not sure what my time was. But it is now time to dismount as we leave this pure wilderness area. And it's time to enter our world again that is filled with so much artificiality. But as for me, I'm ready to mount up again and explore some wilderness. Are you guys ready to come with me? Any questions?
How'd you hear about it?
Well, Linda always gets on the internet and she researches rides, yes. So there's lots of different places out there to explore yet. She wants to go to Iceland, and I'm kind of dragging my feet about that because I think we could explore some more areas in the United States. Any other questions? Yes?
Were you a golfer with your brother?
No.
Dad wouldn't take my sister out on the golf course.
Well, we walked and we caddied for him when we were little, but that was it. Yep. Well, thank you very much.